More than 2/3 of our sales come from outside the United States. We're based in Minnesota in the central northern part of the United States. And we have operations in nearly 200 or sales in nearly 200 countries. I personally lost track of the number of countries I've visited, but we have major operations in Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Australia, India, across Europe, across South America. I served as our Director General for Mexico for a period of time. We have operation, and of course Canada and the United States. We have operations all around the world, over 100 manufacturing sites across 70 countries. I think that it is just beyond our ability to conceive of it. And when massive new technology disruption comes in place, it's impossible to imagine. You talk about we've heard about the IBM CEO who could not imagine why anyone would want a computer in their own home. You've heard about people not understanding why anyone would want a car because horses were really the best solution. It's a wild world. It's going to be so exciting in the future. Growing up, my parents were both teachers. My dad taught chemistry and my mom taught special education at the middle school level. So big challenges there. My dad really wanted me to be a chemical engineer, so I felt like I was rebelling when I became a physicist. So that was kind of an interesting twist. But we also, as a result of having parents as both teachers, we had a lot of flexibility in the summer.
In Youth We Trust sits down with successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, educators, and others from around the world. We spotlight how individuals and organizations are shaping a better world, directly or indirectly, for the coming generations through their focus on sustainability, equity, education, and more to empower young people to create the future they deserve. And now, in Youth We Trust.
Hi, Gayle. Welcome to the podcast in Youth We Trust, and it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Prashant. I'm delighted to join you today.
So where are you joining us from?
I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm working in my home office today.
And you work for 3M, a company that I hugely admire for innovation.
Oh, thanks for that. Yes, I work for 3M Company. I am a longtime veteran. I joined 3M. I have my undergrad degree in physics, and I joined 3M immediately after getting my PhD in material science. Never thought I would work for the company for decades, but that's what's happened. So it's an honor to serve as the Chief Sustainability Officer today.
So let's go straight into into it, and I would like to start by taking you back to your younger self, Gayle. And the question I have for you is: when you were growing up, did you see anything around you, a problem or a challenge that became a quest for you, either because you wanted to solve the problem, or through your process of growing up you saw things change dramatically, which then inspired you?
Yeah. Growing up, my parents were both teachers. My dad taught chemistry and my mom taught special education at the middle school level. So big challenges there. My dad really wanted me to be a chemical engineer, so I felt like I was rebelling when I became a physicist. So that was kind of an interesting twist. But we also, as a result of having parents as both teachers, we had a lot of flexibility in the summer. And they would pack us up in our pop-up trailer and we'd leave upstate New York where I lived. And we would travel across the United States and Canada. And so I visited almost every national park in the United States. There's some new ones, so I haven't necessarily visited those, but I visited those and really gained appreciations, whether it was, hiking on glaciers in Canada, which I've gone back to see and are not quite as present as they were back then, or seashores in the United States or the Grand Canyon, just so many amazing nature experiences. And I think that's affected me pretty profoundly. I do have, and I'm sure this will come out in our conversation as we talk about the future, I have a strong appreciation for science and technology and how that can really help advance the world, because in fact it has so much so far. We couldn't even be doing what we're doing right now without significant technology that's been developed in the last decade or two. But also tying that to nature and having outdoor spaces and spaces where we can really reconnect in deeper, more soulful kind of ways. So I feel a sense of purpose around those things that was instilled pretty at a pretty early age.
Yeah, and so that actually, it shows that you had a very positive upbringing with nature, with science. That's not very common, particularly the science bit, not for everyone. And in our conversation just before we started, you told me that your grandparents work for Kodak. That is
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? Like, did you see the transition of that company itself, and did that
Oh my
actually influence
gosh.
you in any way?
The first time I ever went to see a movie was at so Kodak was the foundation. I grew up near Rochester, New York, and Kodak was the foundation of the community. The first movie I went to see, I remember vividly, was Sleeping Beauty. The old version. I think there's a newer one that probably the people watching this have seen, but the original version, animated film, and they showed it at the Kodak studios, and you could only get in with somebody who was a Kodak employee. So my grandparents took me there, and I don't know, I was really little. I'm very excited to be there. I remember growing up, I knew a lot of people who worked for Kodak. My grandparents had pensions from Kodak and lived out their years as supported by Kodak. And when I was, maybe having my first job, I worked in a retail store. And when those Kodak bonuses came through in December, it would change the economy for a couple days. And now when I go back to visit my brother and my parents, I see that those old historic buildings from Kodak, they're not what they used to be. This is an example of a company that didn't evolve. So I'm actually really appreciative of everything that Kodak had to offer, and George Eastman and founding the company and all of those things. But in going to 3M, one of the reasons I chose 3M was the diversity of technologies and the diversity of businesses, in part because I know I have a short attention span, but also because I thought that there was great opportunity for the future. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to get to know so much of the world, get to know people, but also broadly apply technology across different spaces. And that's kind of how our company works. And that's part of, in the sustainability space, how I strive to collaborate with other companies to work on these solutions that can really make a difference for the world.
Well, so interesting. So now, when we look at your childhood, there is this, not a Kodak moment, but a Kodak journey, right?
Yeah, for
But at the
sure.
same time, there is also an absence of really significant challenges, right? That is also true for me. I grew up in India, and although I saw poverty around me, not quite. Like, we lived in a place where most of the people were very well educated and things like that. So I was insulated a little bit from the problems in the world. But if you look at today as parents, which we both
Mhm.
are, the reality is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really hard time in many ways. I think that so many of the things that have brought us great technology have also brought great challenges. Um, and I've had the opportunity to spend time in other parts of the world outside of the places where I live and where our kids live. And I mean, we took a family trip and volunteered in Africa as one example, of really help, helping us understand, what's happening in communities there, where are the needs, how can we contribute. And I think that, was important and formative for us. Um, I would go back to, the technologies and the way that things are changing.
So when we look at the younger generation today, do you think it makes sense to involve them in the challenge, in solving the challenges? We didn't do that, nor were we aware of it. So is it, on the one
No.
hand,
Mhm.
no, on the one hand, part of me says, let young people be, enjoy life, because Everybody has to kind of work, and then it's a bit of a slog. Uh, on the other hand, we find that the young people are suffering from either climate anxiety or mental health crisis, and they're living in a very disruptive world with AI coming in. So involving them and letting them shape their future is helpful. What is your view?
Oh, I totally agree that the next generation is such an important piece of it. And well, it bothers me a lot that there's a mental health crisis and that there's so much climate anxiety. I feel some of the climate anxiety perhaps differently than a lot of people do because I work every day in this space. And we were talking about, both of us attended the UN climate conference in Dubai last December. And um, there's a lot that's happening in this space. And when we think about where we've been, and as challenging as life is today, you know, the relative agency of humans around the world is in a much better place than it was when we were kids. There's a lot more capabilities, and a lot of that's been enabled by technology. At the flip side, that's been, I believe, the source of some of this anxiety in the younger population and the source of mental stress and mental health crisis. So I think it's critical that young people get involved in the solution, because as much as we try, they're living in a little bit different world than we are or we did when we were their age. It's a different experience. They have different skill sets above and beyond. And it happens with every generation. They're going to be the ones who make the difference over this longer span of their lives and their children's lives. And I think engaging them, inspiring them, bringing them into awareness on things, having meaningful conversations. I know that's something I love having with my 3 kids, their friends, is, what are the things that you're thinking about? What are the things that you're working on? Did you ever consider this or that? Because as great as the challenges are, I look at the emerging technologies and how many things we've solved as humanity. And I think there's so much more that we can do. Now, in many cases, we have to get on with doing it because there's so much we know about what can be done and how much a difference it can make. And, as humans, we're also maybe a bit resistant to change. We know what we know how to do now, and there's resistance to making the changes that we know we should. But those are things that there's so much that we can do. And I think you mentioned briefly AI. I know we talked about it in the prep discussion. Artificial intelligence is something that, honestly, to me, it's pretty mind-boggling. But I've heard it said that any technology that's sufficiently advanced appears as magic when it starts. And the things that we see with AI today, whether it's creating videos of Dalmatians jumping from one balcony to another in Italy, or flying unicorns, there are things that are really awesome that can be created that seem miraculous or seem magical. I think these are opportunities now where it's going to become more real in our world in ways that it is impossible for us to conceive today. I mean, the world is going to be so different as a result of this that it's mind-boggling, and I'm very excited about what can come with solutions for that. It has to be managed right, of course, but I think that's where the next generation can really help us.
But that then brings me to the question of, if you look at education, that's largely remained the same. The way we teach, or what the young people are taught.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that works for this coming generation with things changing so quickly on climate, on AI?
I think that the traditional education system works for some people. I mean, it's pretty clear that there are people that it works for. I think it's also clear that the traditional education system has trouble keeping up on new technologies, because the teachers that are in place that have been teaching for 30, 20, even 10 years in some of these spaces, the technology changes so rapidly. Now, if you're going to study ancient Greece and the classics, it probably is fine. But the new technology pieces and how to stay current with that and how to make the biggest impact for students and help them be most ready when they're coming out of each grade and then college. I do think that's a big challenge. And how do we, because I think we could do better with that. As a physicist, there was Albert Einstein, there was Richard Feynman, and some really great professors. We could have them teaching our classes, for the older stuff. And then others who are really at the cutting edge of science today could be teaching the classes in another way. I mean, I think there's an interest in having different styles of teaching and different students. I don't know. I'm thinking about this. I don't think it's solved, but I think that there's some great opportunity to have basically anyone anywhere on the planet have access to the best teachers in the world. And we see it in computer science now. People are getting certificates. Yes, you need to get you want to get a degree. It will help you. Sometimes you don't need to get it, but it will help you. I would advise that to people. You want to get the degree. It will help advance you longer term. But so much is certification. And, various high-tech sites or high-tech companies provide those certifications. You accumulate those, you pass tests that are all graded online, real time with the computer systems. And that can, I think that's a whole new way to keep up with the technology. And I think it's going to become increasingly important.
I just wrote down that this is probably one of my most positive interviews because I ask you about a problem and you actually talk very positively about the possibilities, which is actually it kind of is rewiring my brain a little bit. So twice I've done that, and twice you've said, look, actually we could have an Albert Einstein teaching millions.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't think about that. It's actually possible.
For sure.
So this
it's not really the guy. We're not, well, okay, give that to the next generation. They'll reincarnate somebody. I don't know. But but I think, we can do it through AI and for virtual.
Yeah, of course.
That's totally possible. What do we want that future to be like? And what would it take to get there? And that's one of the big exciting things I'd say between companies right now, and the synergies and collaboration that we see is, okay, if only we had this capability. Well, maybe my company doesn't have that, but another company or individual does. How do we partner together to?
Well, you're talking about the very essence of what Loomi is trying to do. We are young, but what we are trying to do is bold, and it hasn't been done before, which is trying to put the young person at the center, but get academia, corporations, and the government to collaborate around how to help them build a better future for themselves and for everybody else. It's a very, very difficult task, but it cannot be accomplished if you remove any one of these stakeholders. So let's move on to what is it that you are doing today, Gayle. As a chief sustainability officer at 3M, your metrics are extremely impressive. I just want to focus on two, which relate to young people. Yeah. You have you've got 108,000 hours of skills-based volunteering at 3M. You had 2.8 million learning hours on STEM. That's impressive. So talk to me more about how you're influencing the life or the future for these coming generations.
Yeah. I can talk about both of those. They sound similar, but they're a little bit different. So the skills-based volunteering, volunteering is great. Volunteering can be done in many, many ways. There's so many needs in the world. But when you have people who have specialized skills, the law profession has done this for a long time with pro bono work. We don't see that the same way with engineers or designers and scientists. That's not been a traditional approach, but 3M has leaned in on that. And we have a variety of different ways that it's done. The program overall is called 3M Impact. And we do things locally in communities that can be done. But the flagship program is one where we go into less developed communities that have economic challenges, humanity challenges, and we partner with a local non-government organization, a local organization who works with us, and we spend a few months up front and then 2 weeks in advance preparing, and then 2 weeks on the ground, and then 2 weeks wrapping up back at home. And so we take it's actually a pretty competitive program. We have 50 times the number of people applying as we actually send out, but we've been doing the program for over a decade now, so it's building and we're getting more and more people. We actually curate those teams so that they're really diverse in terms of skill sets, in terms of geographic background, and without exception, everyone I've talked with after they've completed this program said it was the best development activity they've ever participated in. Because yes, you were volunteering, and yes, you needed to expand your subject matter expertise in a specific direction, but it brought you together with people that you didn't know. So that's the skills-based volunteering that we think is really important and we found to be transforming and inspiring. The STEM piece has been really exciting. Traditionally, 3M has a long program where we've had visiting wizards, where we have scientists go and visit local schools. That we do this in our facilities all across the world, whether it's in the United States or Dubai or London or Japan or wherever. We have scientists who go and visit schools, and we've done this for decades. We've done a lot of other things along the lines, bringing people into 3M and so on. But with COVID, tragic situation, but make lemonade when you can. We realized that a lot of things were going more virtual, just like you and I are now. And we developed programs that engaged and helped teach STEM online. And we found that some of those have really been picked up. Yes, we've launched them through our own networks, but they've been picked up. And I would say the biggest piece that picked up recently was the government of China thought this was a great way to help advance STEM education across people in China. And that was one of the things that really helped us jump to the next level in terms of engagement. So the number of people we touch now with STEM education is much greater, orders of magnitude greater than we ever could when we were going through individually school by school. So it's kind of fun, how you bring technology
Yeah,
in.
it is. Yeah, I think this is the skills part, but I'd love for you to just talk about the impact you're driving on sustainability and climate, because you're doing quite a lot
Absolutely.
on
So
three
at
different.
3M, we see science as really where we can make the biggest difference, where we have the biggest responsibility. And so we have three pillars that we have around sustainability. So it's science for circular to help advance a global circular economy, where we have goals on plastics waste and water and reusability of materials and so on. We have science for circular, science for climate. And so talk about carbon emissions reductions in our own operations, and then inventing products and partnering with others so that others can help reduce their footprint. And then science for community. And those last ones that we were talking about in terms of the volunteer hours and engaging to bring in next generation students and skill sets development around STEM. Those are pieces of that, but it's also products that really help the world be more positive. I think the world got familiar with 3M. Originally, it might have been Scotch tape and Post-it notes, maybe scouring sponges. But then, in the pandemic, lots of people were looking for N95 respirators, and that's a major product that 3M makes all around the world. So, I think our products make a difference across all three: science for circular, science for climate, science for community, but also the way we engage with communities on that, and how we drive things in our own operations for continuous improvement.
Wow, this is great. And to what extent is your impact international?
Yeah, so more than 2/3 of our sales come from outside the United States. We're based in Minnesota in the central northern part of the United States. And we have operations in nearly 200, or sales in nearly 200 countries. I personally lost track of the number of countries I've visited, but we have major operations in Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Australia, India, across Europe, across South America. I served as our Director General for Mexico for a period of time. We have operation, and of course Canada and the United States. We have operations all around the world, over 100 manufacturing sites across 70 countries. It's a very diverse sort of human geography that we have represented and that we learn from across our employee base. So it's.
But how are you
It's
driving the
interesting.
sustainability? So, how are you driving
Yeah.
the sustainability agenda in these countries?
Yeah, so it's a number of things. We set big, bold goals, like we've reduced our carbon emissions in our scope 1 and scope 2. That's our own direct emissions, more than 80% since 2002. That's a team effort. So that happens from every facility around the world has goals and is driving things forward. Similarly, we have goals around water and reducing plastics waste. The one that I think actually makes the biggest difference for us, and we're continuing to evolve it, is we since 2018 have had a requirement that every new product we launch must have a sustainability value commitment. And it can be different from one product to another, but it must advance in a way that's relevant for that portfolio. So what we do for a product that helps, enable electric vehicles might be very different than what we do to put in 100% recycled content to make a scouring sponge, but they're relevant in their space. And that is one that I think is really transformative. We've had that requirement for new products for some time, and now we're working on an approach to further quantify that to help make more informed decisions, but now to actually go beyond it to assess entire portfolios of our product portfolio and help us aim in directions of how can we really help that business. And it's not just because it's a good thing to do. I think it is a good thing to do, but it's also, there's an increasing demand for this. And it helps us get ahead of what our customers ask for, because by the time our customers are asking for something, they're asking for that from our competitors as well. But when we're actually looking to leapfrog that and really understand where things are going, that's when we get some real differentiation and we can really apply unique science with our customers to make a difference.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. And are you working with the governments in any of these countries or everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do. There's a lot of emerging regulations that we're all experiencing and perhaps becoming a little overwhelmed by. Whether it's the in the United States, the SEC expectations for the Securities and Exchange Commissions, for the European Union. There are a number of climate and biodiversity and water and other types of goals, deforestation, plastics, so on. Where we've got involved. One that's really meaningful and is an important catch, I think, is a couple of years ago, there was the United Nations was bringing forward a plastics treaty. The intent was, and still is, to have a global plastics treaty that would help reduce plastics waste. The original language was really challenging. And our team started to catch wind on it, both from our government affairs organization and our sustainability organization, that the language that was being used, while I'm sure it was well intended, actually had some unfortunate pieces that would have, had it been implemented in the original language, actually prevented things like cell phones from working the way we know how to work, or electric vehicles from working. So many things. So we thought that it was important that with our scientific expertise, we get involved, and we're not alone. We are part of an alliance for a global plastics treaty that engaged, I think, 80 companies and non-government organizations from the beginning to help inform that. But I think it's critical that we engage governments and help inform. We know things about manufacturing and about science that we don't expect our government officials to know.
Yeah, it's very clear. I think it's very, very clear from looking at the metrics. So time is of the essence here, and not just for the problems we are talking about, but also for this episode. Um, Let me just take you into the future to finish things. Let's go to 2040, which is not very far, but not immediate. What kind of future do you see?
This episode is brought to you by Loomi.network. We're on a mission to help the next generation prepare to take on the world. Our AI-augmented platform runs quests that help 10 to 25-year-olds shape their future by developing AI, entrepreneurship, and design thinking skills to solve the most pressing business and social issues. If you or your organization wants to impact the next generation positively, we'd love to talk to you. To learn more, visit Loomi.network.
I choose, and I think that anybody who works in the sustainability space really has to be an optimist at core, Because if you're not, it's just too depressing. You can't, there's too many things. You can see the positives. I feel like it's a little bit of a manic depressive kind of role where you can see the positives and get excited about that, but recognizing, if you just look at the other direction, there's so many negatives to learn from and to address. But when I look at 2040, I'll probably give you a more positive view than most people do, because I see technologies emerging. I see so many different technologies that we know about today, from modernizing our electric grid to transforming the way that we do transportation, to making smart buildings, to advancing digital understanding and electronic devices, and perhaps most importantly, artificial intelligence as a tool. I do think the impact of artificial intelligence is going to be way beyond what you and I have lived through with the impact of, the internet and going online with so many things, and the concepts of what it's going to enable. We talked about, Albert Einstein or Richard Feynman delivering lectures, seemingly live. I think that it is just beyond our ability to conceive of it. And when massive new technology disruption comes in place, it's impossible to imagine. We've heard about the IBM CEO who could not imagine why anyone would want a computer in their own home. You've heard about people not understanding why anyone would want a car because horses were really the best solution. It's a wild world. It's going to be so exciting in the future. There's going to be negative consequences, but if we can all engage and really work together on the solutions, I believe it's going to be much brighter than what we have. And if we really look at what things were like, so that's what 35-ish years from now. If we look back 35 years, there's so many reasons to believe that the world is better today than it was then. We'll continue to have our challenges, but I think it's going to have technology solutions and ability for people to advance and live the way that they want to beyond our wildest dreams today. So that's what I think.
Wow. I mean, this is really positive. I mean, to be more serious for a second, listening to you, who's in the trenches on sustainability, who's observing things from a much closer vantage point, that you are optimistic, and you're genuinely optimistic. You were when you came on to this conversation. You are now. You're giving me more evidence. I think that gives an average Joe like me and the people I interact with quite a lot of hope.
I'm glad to give you hope. I will tell you that there's a lot of people who are not optimistic, and it does require action. We need to take action. But the reason I think it will work is I think that it's a business opportunity. And we can have as many laws as we want, but governments don't move as fast as businesses do. And look at the innovations. I don't want to give too many examples here, but, electric vehicles, if it weren't for Tesla making electric vehicles aspirational, I don't think we would be where we are now with the transformation towards
That's true.
Electrifying transportation. I think that there are breakthroughs that hopefully somebody listening to this today, a young person, are going to have that just change the way you think about it. And I think having sustainability and the sustainable solutions be aspirational, be the things that people want, be smart, design, clever. And I think that's the way we get to the breakthroughs. And it has to be something that people want, not just because it's good for the world, but because they feel like it's good for them. And I think that's very possible. And I think that those business opportunities and having them emerge is a really exciting transformation that we get to live through.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you've ended up on a very strong note by saying make sustainable solutions aspirational. But thank you again for coming on the show and for sharing your experiences, your optimism. And I look forward to actually delving even deeper in possibly a follow-on discussion about it, because there's a lot to cover. I think we can go very deep on specific aspects of innovations in sustainability. That's one of the things I picked up from this conversation.
Well, very good. I'd be happy to talk with you again. Best wishes for you and for all of your podcast people and the youth that you work with.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a story or someone you know does, please recommend them to us by email at hello@loomi.network. We'll see you next time on In Youth We Trust.